news presentation.
Well, this is Interface on SABC 3. My name is Thembi Samachele. Welcome to you. And as you know, it's Youth Day today. Happy Youth Day. And it's also Happy Father's Day to all the dads out there, by the way. And today we're talking about youth issues. You know that the youth of 76 did wonderful things for this country, fought for the freedom that we have and we enjoy today. But are the youth of today apathetic? Is that what we are? That's the question that we're asking today. And we do welcome your thoughts on SMS 33726. That's how you contact us. Or you can find us on Facebook. It's Interface on SABC 3. Now, let's introduce our guest to you. Ndumiso Hadebe is the winner of the One Day Leader program, and he's also a BCom final year student. And we also have Charles Obelhozer, who is the national chairperson of AfriForum Youth, and we're also joined by Zandi Hadebe, who's a spokesperson for the Black Wash organization. And they're going to be chatting to us about all things youth. And thank you so much for joining us, and welcome to all three of you.
Thank you very much for having us.
Charles, 1976, the youth of 76 did wonderful things, as I said. Today, when we celebrate Youth Day, what significance does that day or this day hold for you, if any?
Yes, Youth Day for us is about celebrating the future of young people. But it seems that the ANC has hijacked our public holidays in South Africa because there's no clear distinction between any public event or any public celebration that the ANC holds and that the government holds. So
hold on, I'm not sure what you're saying now. The youth of 76 and the significance of their role in Youth Day, do you recognize that?
We recognize that, but we feel that if we commemorate, let's say, 1976, we should also commemorate other young people that have played an important role in South Africa. Not just Hector Peterson and what happened on that day, but also hundreds of other young people that has contributed or other atrocities in our history. I think it's a very one-dimensional celebration of Youth Day. We are one of the most diverse countries in the world, yet we only tell one story when it comes to Youth Day. One example is that today, on the 16th of June in 1900, a decision was taken by the British that led to more than 27,600 to the death of 27,000 young people.
It's a very hard number.
It's a lot.
27,600, yes.
And of course, that is a very big event in our history. But obviously, I don't think we should just look at one incident and one thing in our history. We should look at our whole history. I don't think that government is taking into account really unity and diversity when we celebrate one part of history.
Charles, when I think of what happened in 1976, and I'm sure most South Africans think in this way, we think, particularly black South Africans, you look at what they did and you now see the results of that in your everyday life in 2013. The fact that our children don't have to study in Afrikaans in their schools is a significant thing. So when you bring in the British youth and all of that, how would you propose that be incorporated in the celebrations today, and what significance would that have on us today?
I think what we can take from that is the importance of education. So let's take a magnifying glass on Youth Day and take a look at education, because that is an extremely important point today. And we have to admit that education today, we can't have a quality education system as long as Angie Motshekga is the Minister of Basic Education. I think 3/4 of learners that enter grade 1 don't leave grade 12. We have one of the largest education budgets in the world, yet we don't have a very good education system. We'll
get to education just now. Zan, did you agree with that? Has he got a point that Youth Day should not just be about what happened in 1976, we should include what happened in Britain as well?
Well, firstly, I think Youth Day has been misunderstood by a lot of people. It has been reduced to, just a day whereby young black people took to the street to fight against Afrikaans. A lot of people seem to be ignorant of the fact that it wasn't just Afrikaans that the youth of 1976 were up against. It was the entire structure of white power, because for someone to impose a language upon a particular nation, that person must have a power to do so. So without that power, Afrikaans wouldn't be a problem. I wouldn't mind learning Afrikaans myself because it would just be a language, you know. But we're in a situation whereby Afrikaans is not just a language, but it's also a language that is used to oppress us. Because if you look back in the conditions of 1976, black people were not allowed to study further, you know. Afrikaans was used, or the education that we got, and we are still getting, I want to argue, limited us, because it was education not only from our own framework, but it was an education that doesn't serve our interests, you know. We are
so
educated.
When Charles says, you know, we should be more inclusive in the way that we celebrate Youth Day and not just look at what the youth of 76 did, what's your response?
Firstly, we cannot celebrate. I also have a problem with this notion of, you know, celebrating, because you take away the significance of what that moment meant for especially us black youth in Soweto. I mean, it's not every day where you see young people stand up and defy their parents, their teachers, and go against the grain to say, look, we demand better and we shall get better. So in commemorating and in commemorating now, we can't also make the mistake to just pull everyone together. I think there's a certain dialogue that needs to happen between the youth that feels excluded and the youth that is, you know, carrying on with the celebrations and the commemorations. I'm trying to say that it's a bit naive to expect everyone to be included, because not much has changed. If you look at the social structure, not much has changed.
I'm going to give you a chance to respond to that now, but Ndumiso, what are your thoughts on this? Charles says that minority groups, white people in particular, feel sidelined. They feel that they're left out when it comes to government celebrations or commemorations of what happened, like Youth Day. What are your thoughts?
I think that Charles has a very democratic right to express those views and also to express the concerns that he has as a young South African today. But I also think that it's important for us as South Africans to commemorate days, the symbolic meaning behind days such as the 16th of June 1976. As the black populace, it's not a hidden secret that most of the governance of the day was targeted at oppressing the black people as a whole. And that moved on from every area of our lives. And as young South Africans today, the times that we live in have changed. And so it's important for us to understand the symbolic meaning of days such as these and use the messages that they carried in identifying and addressing the realities that we face today while giving hope and inspiration to other young South Africans.
Should we make it inclusive? Should we look at all the struggles of young people across the board and say this is a day to commemorate those struggles?
I think if we would be able to do that, it would also relate to issues of public holidays, and we would have public holidays 365 days a year.
No, what he's saying is on this day, move away from what happened in 1976, or over and above what happened in 1976, look at other things that happened that were of significance to other young people and make it more inclusive.
You know, in a democratic state, inclusivity and open-mindedness is important, but the significance of 1976 should not be shied away from.
All right.
That's my firm belief.
We're going to have to take a short break. Charles, I'll give you a chance to respond to that when we come back. Do join us after this and do give us your thoughts on 33726 and also on our Facebook page, Interface on SABC3. Stay with us. Welcome back to Interface here on SABC3, when we're talking about young people and whether or not we are apathetic, and we're chatting to Zandi Khadebe, who is a revolutionary by profession, she says, and also the spokesperson of Black Wash, and also Ndumiso Hadebe, the winner of One Day Leader, and Charles Oberholzer is the national chairperson of AfriForum Youth. And before the break, Charles, I said I'd give you a chance to respond to some of the comments that were made earlier, but maybe in so doing you can also outline for us what makes the marginalized people, and let's call a spade a spade. What makes young white people marginalized in your view, or feel marginalized?
Let's look at Youth Day celebrations. If government holds a Youth Day celebration on this day, why don't young white people go to these celebrations? What is it to celebrate? Should a young white person celebrate the fact that he can't be a cadet at SAAA, or should he celebrate that he can't be appointed by Woolworths because of the color of his skin?
Yeah,
should
can
he
not
celebrate
commemorate the fact that there were young people that died for the freedom that we now enjoy today?
Yes, it can, but then the government should also acknowledge minorities, acknowledge other things, other youth, other young people as well. You can't expect from a young person to go to a public event organized by government, celebrating ANC political goals and celebrating only one part of history. These young people, they don't get state bursaries. What is there to celebrate? And then there's people like Minister Lulu Zingwane that says white Calvinistic people, white people in South Africa like to eat their wives. These kind of statements show a clear intolerance towards minorities. And we see this even with opposing views. When people like Helen Zille and Patricia de Lille want to say something at these events, they are verbally gunned down at these events.
I hear you. Here's a quick question, Charles. Are you not intolerant yourself in the way that you view the June 16 commemorations and the blood, sweat and tears and the death of those young people, in saying that over and above that, you know, white people are marginalized and therefore it should go beyond that, without acknowledging what happened on that day?
Let's take from history what we can and let's learn from that. It was 1976 is an important thing in our history, and we should acknowledge that. But I'm saying let's go do more than that. Let's really show diversity by celebrating more dimensions of our history.
Okay.
That is as simple as that.
All right. Sand.
Well, for us, history is still, you know, what the youth of 1976 experienced are some of the things that we are experiencing right now. You know, we can't just let history rest because we feel that history has not actually left us. I mean, if you look at where most of the young people are today, if you look at, for example, most of the people were shot in Marikana, those people were my age, some of them were even younger, and their skin was black. So for us, we cannot, you know, say that history is there. That history is still happening now. The significant gains of 1994 have not filtered down to the black youth, you know.
But I want you to get to this point. Does Charles have a point? Do white people, particularly the young people, have a right to feel marginalized in this current situation in South Africa, with everything that we've got, including our constitution and everything else?
That's why I find it a bit, you know, disingenuous for them to feel marginalized, because when we look at who is really marginalized, if you look at the economy, it's black young people. I don't find their marginalization legitimate in the context of white supremacy, in a context whereby the wealth is still largely, you know, white-owned. I mean, some of us had to call our mothers to get here, you know, which means, you know, we are still not as free as, you know, the so-called minority. And if you look at, I feel that, you know, they could always talk to, I mean, white power is on their side. They could always talk to their cousin to say, look, you need to fix this. Whereas with us, it's completely different. We are at the bottom, you know. And secondly, I don't really feel that they should even have the need to want to get into the June 16 space, because that space, if you look at it and factually, it should be exclusively black. I don't think we should entertain.
And that's the point that Dumiso was making before the break. Do you think that in the marginalization issue, that there is some truth to what Charles is saying?
You know, the reality of the matter is that if you call yourself a true South African today, then you understand the symbolic meaning behind days such as June 16. And if we as young South Africans today, if we're going to particularly focus on the issue of race and the message that was embedded in the events that happened in our history and the ramifications that followed after, and what the responsibility that we have as young people to be solution oriented in the view and the perspectives that we have of these events, then I think we would have a more clearer and a more broader and direct approach when it comes to the issues that we're facing as young people.
Let's look at those issues. I mean, you know, education was mentioned here. Unemployment is another big one. You say we should be solutions oriented.
Yes.
What should happen when it comes to, for example, unemployment? We've got a graphic that's going to come up on the screen now that says that 51% of young people in South Africa, of those, 33% are unemployed. And also, if you have a look at the pass rates in schools, it's not looking too good. So what's the solution? Let's start with unemployment first.
with unemployment, the reality of the matter is that in South Africa today, a majority of South Africans are young people, and the ramifications of unemployment affect us. And one of the ways that I strongly believe is a means of tackling youth unemployment is through education. We need to have an education system that evolves and speaks to industry-specific needs, so that we're able to respond to the needs that we have in society. And secondly, we also need to assist young black entrepreneurs as well, since they are the ones who, 80% of black-owned businesses fail within the first year.
But the government would argue that that's what they're doing. Charles, what more needs to be done?
I think we have to cultivate that entrepreneurship spirit. Is correct. At this stage, small and medium enterprises contribute for 9 million jobs in South Africa. They make up 60% of the GDP. Of course, that is a solution. That is something we should drive. Education is the basis of everything. Angie must go, obviously, and we have to start building quality schools.
Second time you're saying this.
That's how important it is.
Besides that, I mean, it's a personality issue, I suppose, for you. But besides that, on a structural level, what should change?
Quality schools need to be built in rural areas with well-paid teachers, simple things like that. Entrepreneurship, as we've mentioned, is an important factor. Unemployment also goes back to education. Education is the backbone of everything. We need a quality education system. That's where the solution is.
All right, and we've got to take another short break, and we will be reading some of your Facebook messages right after this. Just taking a quick look at some of your Facebook messages. Benson Zwane says, youth empowerment is lip service in government talk. Young people get into drugs as a result of frustration. And Dikosha says, the youth of South Africa is frustrated by the poverty and widespread unemployment. How will you address that? And I'm hoping you're talking to the government, not me. And Venetia Lowe says, jobs out there are obtained only through people you know, aunts, uncles, neighbors, parents, friends, and skills are only acquired when you know someone out there. Pet Asanda Nogwina says, today we commemorate the youth of 1976 who fought for better education. But for me, all went wrong from 2009 when we started to see and experience the poorest education system by our government. Nico Dutoy says, transformation has failed and will always fail. The word has become a swear word for the average middle class who is simply trying to survive and at the same time trying to help those who they can help. And Kumisa Madala says, I'm not sure of the power and influence that young people have. All I know is that for most young people, democracy means it's party time. But we don't have a lot of time. But that's just, you know, a range of Facebook messages that we got. And I do like what you said, Ndumiso, before the break, that we need to start talking solutions. And I want, as we round off, to get to that. But Zandi, before we get to that, there's a statement that you make that I think is very interesting, and I'd like you to unpack that, where you say the government has legalized the dispossession of our people through their anti-black policies from the Freedom Charter to the Constitution. Now, most of us in South Africa value the Freedom Charter and the Constitution, and we hold them very dear. So for you to use those words, very strong words, what do you base that on?
I base that on the realities on the ground, because if you look at what the Freedom Charter promises, I mean, it promises us heaven on earth, but we don't get that. What we get are houses without toilets. What we get are schools that don't only teach us, but miseducate us, you know. The economy is still largely white-owned.
But
you
Rome
find
wasn't built in one day. We've got to start somewhere. Rome wasn't built in one day. The
Yes,
fact that we're
we
not
need
where we aspire to be doesn't mean that the framework that we have is not working.
But we need to start at a stronger position. We can't start at a position where it says that South Africa belongs to all who live in it, whereas you know that the indigenous people should come first. If you take that approach, you are sidelining the main people who are dispossessed. If you don't say to them that, look, we will give you the schools that we promised, but instead what you do, you give them an education system that further dispossesses them, that you are not starting at the right point. And even though Rome was not built overnight, it will take you even more days to build what you want, because you are starting at the point that won't necessarily get you where you want to go. We must start at the point where I think our history has led us.
I think you're opening a whole can of worms about who's an African and who's not, who should benefit and who shouldn't. And I'm sure the two of you can get into it for another half an hour. But Charles, just get it into the solutions here, getting to where we need to be. do you feel that young people like yourself are adding value right now in the current dispensation, and particularly from a party political perspective?
What I experience is that young people are disappointed in political leadership in this country. The IEC said that almost 60% of young people are not interested in politics. So where do young people express themselves? They express themselves through civil society, through social media, and that is where they influence policy rather than just make a mark next to a political party in the national elections next year.
But shouldn't we be striving for that?
Yes, of course. But young people are doing that, and they're going to the internet, they're going to civil society in different ways, trying to influence government. And that is a positive point. I think mentally wise, what we should be doing is move from an entitlement mentality to a DIY, a do-it-yourself mentality, where we as young people say, irrespective of what government does and doesn't do, let's do it ourselves. Let's start in our communities. Let's start bursary funds. Let's go to schools. Let's help young people ourselves.
Dumiso, you work a lot with young people, and do you find that there is still that culture and that mentality of entitlement, or are you finding that young people are becoming more DIY, as Charles says?
You know, I've had the privilege of coming across young people in South Africa who are doing exceptional work in their communities, and I've also come across young people who are very disheartened and who really are laid back about the activities that are happening in their communities. I mean, just the other day my mom was telling me that there was a learner in her class who was vomiting, and she asked that learner why, and that learner said she ate pap and cooking all the previous night. Now, we need to understand that this is the legacy of apartheid that we're living with today. And because we disregard and we rebuke that regime, we as a young people need to take a stand, and we call upon young people to take a stand, to be solution-oriented in approach, and to say, even in the communities that you find yourselves in, get involved in the community projects that we're in. We're at Kliptown today, that young people are doing good work in community development.
We're running out of time, but I do want to know, how do you take a stand, like you say, against apartheid, and take a stand up against all the ills that came with that, while at the same time not alienating and sidelining people like AfriForum?
I think
how do you have an approach that works both ways?
The importance here, we live in a democratic state. The dialogue as we're having today is very important. And as young people, we need to liberate ourselves from the mind first. We need to understand that the times that we live in today have changed, and the challenges that we face have changed. They are socio-economic in nature, and therefore requires us as young people to empower ourselves and to upskill ourselves regardless of the circumstances that we find ourselves in. I mean, a well-known businessman, Mr. Maponya, once said, if you want to know about the past, look at today. If you want to know about the future, look at today.
Yeah.
And that's where we need to begin as young people and be solution-oriented.
Strong words. We've
regard.
got to end it there, but I would have loved another 3 hours with the three of you. But thank you so much for coming through to talk to us. And that's how we come to the end of Interface this evening. To join us again next week at the same time. From me, good night.